Good afternoon. My name is Nate Berkstead, and thank you so much for joining me this afternoon about what does the words of Jesus ask of us in 2026. What I've done is I've taken the last 10 years of headlines, world events, and then held that besides the teachings of Jesus. One of the ways that I want you to be able to read and hear this information is keeping 2026 in the forefront of your mind and understanding that we are drawing these conclusions from a humanitarian, a policy, and public health reporting standpoint. And then we are going to compare them directly with the words of Jesus to help us teach on how do we speak that human situation that he so eloquently brought to us. This also then brings us to the point of for us to ask ourselves some hard questions, the comparison and the honest questions that kind of help us guide our daily decisions. So part one, we're going to open up with the people in front of us. We are going to look at the war and violence, poverty and hunger, and refugees and the stranger. One of the things that has happened in 2026 is we have massive amounts of violence, of war, and where people are under the constant threat of either mass displacement or attacks on civilians. What the international rescue community is reporting that 1 in 7 people worldwide live under the threat of armed conflict. What this is asking of us is more than having views or opinions about the war. How do we actively reduce harm? How do we protect the civilians? And how do we also pursue reconciliation through de escalating hostility and refusing language that dehumanize? Suffering is something that is blazing across the surface of this earth right now, and people are being forgotten. And we would need to ask the question, what would make peace more possible? And one of the things that Jesus said is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Jesus doesn't bless the powerful, the loudest, the most victorious. He blesses the peacemaker, which is a role to take up and not an opinion to hold. Food is one of the most basic human needs that we have. And we are seeing a crunch as this humanitarian um, gap widens between what people need and what is being given. And in 2026, we have seen immense cut to the global support and aid that have funded some of these life-saving resources. And in that, do we see people who are vulnerable as burdens? Are we viewing them as statistics? Or do we see them as bearers of sacred worth? Feeding and sheltering and visiting and welcoming and protecting, not only offered as a charity towards others, but as a heart posture as service to Jesus himself. For when I was hungry, you gave me meat, and when I was thirsty, you gave me drink. And as much as you have done it to the least of my brothers, you have done that to me. And one of the things that I think within religion we often overlook is how our physical needs mirror our spiritual emotional needs. And we want, there's been this pressure from religious groups to force people into conversion before they are given their daily bread. There is a manipulation, a quid pro quo of we will give you food if you accept Jesus. And one of the things that I think is so critical is that's not the way that Jesus operated his ministries. It's not the way that he operated his sacrifice for us as humans. He gave himself freely with no contingency on our end. And so I think as we navigate these questions, we need to stop looking at through the lens of American Christianity and we start asking the question of what does radical love look like through Jesus himself? How we view immigration reform and what do we do with the refugees? The question of displacement is one of the defining issues of 2026. And we are now seeing how our view of humanity is being exposed. We are seeing how we treat our neighbor, how we treat the stranger is something that is it's a test. It is a moral test of our values, which brings to a conversation that still allows for order and safety while rejecting cruelty, humiliation, indifference, and scapegoating. The question is not whether a policy is lawful, but we need to ask the question, is this policy humane? These words do not raise the real debate about law, order, and policies, but it sets a moral baseline on how is the stranger treated, and that reveals the conditions of our heart. One of the things we need to talk about is how we've built these systems of healthcare. How does mercy work, and what is wealth and the common good within our this year? We have over 10,000 attacks on healthcare workers. And one of the things that we are also seeing is this outbreak of Ebola, the heat health alerts. There's also shrinking access to healthcare. And one of the things that we need to ask as healthcare leaders and educators alike is do our processes and systems make it easier or harder for people to receive care, how to learn about safety, and do the right thing? Access is a moral design question, not just an operational one. And one of the things that one of the things that my grandma used to tell me is that loneliness is one of the best ways for a person to get sick and die. And that was one of the reasons why, as a small child, I was brought to the hospitals regularly to visit those who were sick. And sometimes it was just simply sitting beside the bed of somebody and holding their hand and not even saying anything, but just that human connection. The care for the sick, it sits at the center of faithful living. Systems are judged not only by their efficiency, but whether if vulnerable people are cared for and safely reached. Public discourse remains to be shaped by polarization. And some of the things that we're seeing is how we view the economy, immigration rights, abortion, control and access, gun control, healthcare costs, and climate policy is all shaping this divide that we fill rather than closing it. I think one of the questions that we have to sit and be willing to ask ourselves is moral imagination before speaking, posting, voting, correcting, or debating. Would I consider this treatment righteous if I was personally receiving it? Truth matters, but so does mercy. Conviction without mercy becomes cruelty, and mercy without truth becomes avoidance. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Therefore, all things, whosoever should do that men should do to you, do even to them. This confronts the culture directly. Not does Jesus say to treat people only well when they agree with you, but when they also disagree with you. And one of the things that Jesus doesn't shy away from is an honest conversation about money and wealth and the inequality between the rich and the poor. And one of the things that we can recognize right now is the state and local governments are absorbing a real financial strain in 2026 between Medicaid and utility costs, emergency management, transportation funding, and zoning, and this energy transition that we're going through from oil to renewable. Um, this asks us some really hard questions. What do our budgets reveal about what we worship, what we fear, and also what do we treasure? A faithful budget conversation asks whether we are spending to protect the vulnerable, that we serve the common good, and are we resisting greed? For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. We see this all through the scriptures that Jesus repeatedly ties money to the heart. And where the debate focuses on budgets and inflation and who pays what, his words ask a deeper question. His words ask, what do we actually value? In part three, we're going to navigate the world that we hand on, who are children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, and our great great grandchildren. One of the issues that we have in the Western world is we rarely look more than one generation down. And for that, we tend to build um, weak and unstable resources for our upcoming generations. And one of the things I think we need as Western parents is we need to sit down and have the conversation of what are we building for 5 generations down, and what is it going to look like for our great great grandchildren to look at the legacy that we left behind. And I just encourage you as you go through these next parts with me to really hold the future in your hands. As I'm recording this in August of 2026, the world is literally on fire. My eyes are burning and my lungs are filled with smoke. We have wildfires burning all around us. My ground is completely parched. And climate stress is something that we are seeing as there's been an incredible increase of heat strokes and heat related alerts. We have drought. We have had one of the hardest hits on our gardening year this year. And we're seeing that transfer to the infrastructure and also showing some public health risk. You know, these include warnings that are not changing behavior and the oxygen loss that's happening within the water. Like there are so many things that are happening simultaneously here in 2026. And how we care for people who are most affected by heat, hunger, water insecurity, and disaster, especially with those with the least ability to protect themselves. There needs to be this place where we start to have an attentiveness to creation and to those who bear ignoring the cost of it. One of the things that Jesus says is look and consider the lilies of the field and how they grow. One of the things that Jesus did is steward the earth, and he stewarded the plants and the animals. And that compassion that he had to humans, he also had towards creation. And one of the things is creation is used as a teacher of trust and humility and dependence on God. These words lay out no environmental policy, but they are to help us resist anxiety, hoarding, and the invitation to attentiveness and mindfulness. And as we move into this realm of AI and technology and how that works with human dignity, 2026, we are seeing an explosion of opinion and questions around AI governance. And it's one of the biggest issues that is currently being watched in the state and local governments, alongside the remarkable investment in building the infrastructure and then the public skepticism and energy and data risk constraints and the whole liability questions. And then how do we balance automation with human work? It's so much. And one of the things that, as I've been working through my own opinions on AI and technology, the question that I think we need to ask ourselves is how do we evaluate the systems by whether do they increase wisdom, dignity, safety, fairness, and making sure that humanity flourishes. And in practice, automation should reduce burden and it should clarify access and improve training and it should support the learners and not create confusion or invisibility. And it's important to understand that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And this principle transfers directly to technology and tools. Tools should serve people, and people should not serve the tools. And so, if we're going to be working with AI automation and dashboards and workflows, it should support what human beings are doing in the work that they do already and not replace the human. Something that's all too familiar in 2026 is burnout, loneliness, and mental health. And it's interesting that we have more social media platforms and ways to connect with people, but we have some of the most lonely people that I've ever seen. There's just this loneliness and an ache of the heart to actually be seen and connect with humans. And there's this insecurity that is screaming of are we able to actually be authentically real where we are at in our present state. And it comes to that theme of mental health strain and the chronic stress that seems to just keep piling on. And one of the things like that leads to is that loneliness of having to navigate life by yourself. And in the same breath, then where I was being bombarded by bad news. And one of the things I think we have the option to do is figure out what is the good news that we have to share. How are we bearers of good news that bring people up? And I think that that gives us an invitation to refuse romanticizing the exhaustion. And how do we make room for rest and compassion and to share each other's burdens and then build systems that don't crush the people inside of them? One of the things that Jesus says, and it's one of my favorite verses, is come unto me, all that ye that labor and who are heavenly laden, and I will give you rest. And one of the things that I've noticed is Jesus has never shamed me for being tired. There's this invitation that he brings. And again, today, it's not that people are uninformed or they're unmotivated. It's that we are overloaded, anxious, grieving, and carrying invisible burdens. And one of the ways that we have an opportunity is to bear each other's burdens. A burden shared is a burden halved, and a joy shared is doubled. And so, one of the great exercises that we can do with people is to help bear a burden with a friend or a family member, and that will have it. And then we transform that burden through transmutation into joy, and then it's double. And along with the whole AI thing is, oh my gosh, we are moving into this age of what is truth versus misinformation, and how do we tell what is truth, AI versus reality. And then we have all of these disinformation campaigns along with geopolitical disruptions and market shiftings and the volatilities of our world leaderships. And it's like 2026 has become the erosion of shared trust. And it feels like 2026 is asking us, are we able to live with integrity, humility, and accountability? Can we tell the truth without weaponizing it to humiliate anyone? And the freedom is the test of whether the truth is being used well. One of the things that we have to realize is that for so long we have been afraid to be honest. We have our closets that we hide in. And within the gay community, we talk about, coming out of your closet. And straight people, the straight community has this resistance to coming out of the closet. And it's been an interesting observation to realize how much shame, fear, stigmas that straight people are holding. And they they are in the closet deeper than most gay people. And I think we're coming into this period of time where the truth is being asked to, is being told, and we are going to see a line of truth tellers who stand up and they're just going to tell the truth and its simplicity and its beauty, and that truth is going to set people free. And one of the things I've noticed is when you tell the truth with humility, it gives everybody else who understands that truth freedom to be able to move forward and see through the misinformation and the selective outrage, and the truth is then able to bring people into a place of internal freedom that then transforms into external movement. And as I was analyzing and thinking about all 10 of these truths, the thing that came to me is mercy isn't a soft position, it's actually demanding. And we often have this viewpoint of mercy is passive and timid and it's weak. And what I'm seeing is when Jesus talks about mercy, it's not out of a place of fear, weakness, insecurity, or whatnot. It's a demanding one. That mercy then goes and looks war in the eyes, and migration and healthcare and money and creation and technology and all of these questions. And it asks for this return, this ability to ask who is suffering, who is being forgotten, and what would mercy make mercy more possible here? What would mercy actually do in these situations? And the interesting thing is, mercy wouldn't be inactive. It wouldn't be passive. It wouldn't be silent. It demands a truthful answer and action. And one of the things that I would ask of you is, would you say yes to letting mercy move in and through your life today? Would you let mercy move you into a place that you have potentially never considered going, and give you the doorway for you to move into a place of loving people and humanity in a way that you may have never experienced, and let the truth set you free. Let mercy fill your heart, and be willing to ask the question, what would make mercy more possible here? And I just want to say thank you, and I hope you have a great day.